What's up, Zox fam? Now, Tribe 9 has taken us through the ringer. We had an absolute blast on the live stream yesterday, and we did some summons. We actually got a ton of different things to try out on the account, and I wanted to take the time to actually dive a little bit deeper into team composition and as well as tension cards and how these two actually coincide with each other, because the main thing about your experience on this game is realistically playing the thing that's the most efficient. But in order for it to work, you have to understand how these two things work together. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. Now, first thing we're going to start off with is team comp, right? So let's actually go to the manage party screen. Now, the thing is that you might see the team that I'm using. It is consisting of Mew, Santoro, and EG. There's a very specific reason why I'm utilizing this team this way, and we'll kind of talk about that, right? Now, there's a few factors that I will say that you would want to consider when trying to build a team, right? And when you first start the game off, it's very straightforward. It's like, hey, we're going to give you, and let's actually create this one right here. Right, we're gonna give you a damage dealer, right, slash like breaker, right? So he does some damage. He also has really high breaking ability. We're also gonna give you a healer, right, which is Koshi, and then we're also going to give you a tank, which is Roku. So basically, your roles are kind of just generalized as far as like you have your damage dealer, attacker, or breaker with your healer. Then of course you have your tank, right, your aggro tank. Now keep in mind that all the characters can respectively do some sort of damage, so it's not like they just are only in that one singular role, but that's just kind of the general concept of the roles that you get, right? Now, there's another character that you also get too, which is Suki. Suki is actually going to be a nuker, right? She has one of the highest ultimate modifiers that I've seen so far. Actually, wrong skill. There we go. Right here, this skill right here for her ultimate, 7,500%, right? So they give you a ton of value right off rip from just the free characters that they give you. Now, let's say you want to expand outside of that initial composition. The things that you have to consider is what exactly is chaining together and how is it working, right? So reading your character skills is going to be of the utmost importance because there are a ton of different combinations that you can get away with that just all simply work. And I would even argue that the main thing with this game is more so about investment and understanding how to properly chain those characters together. Now, the thing is that if we go back to my managed party and we take a look at the first comp that I'm using, I'll further explain why I'm using this team the way that I'm using it and why I like it so much. Now, what we currently have here, and we'll start off with EG. So EG is actually going to be my unit that is actually going to be aggro tanking, right? Now, the other thing to note about this character is that this character also has something called Trillionaire Law, which basically increases primary attack damage multiplier and secondary attack damage multiplier, right? Now, the other thing is too, is that this is going to be something that stacks. So just kind of keeping that in mind with the Euphoria, with the Trillionaire Law, it basically is going to be able to increase the duration based off of that, right? So that's just kind of like what support value EG is bringing, just in a nutshell. The other thing is, like I mentioned before, is that he has this ability called attention, so it makes enemies prioritize him. Now, the other thing is too, is that he's able to grant party members within the spotlight an effect that will increase their crit rate by 10%. And when a party member within a spotlight deals damage to an enemy, it grants oneself a stack of Euphoria. Now, keep in mind that the Euphoria will actually increase the duration of the spotlight, right? So you see how this is all kind of coinciding. So you would want a damage dealer or someone that's able to attack a lot or at least a respectable amount to be able to keep that going so that you can get to the next point of being able to recast it, right? Now, outside of that, okay, when we're looking at my next character, the reason why I like this character Santoro is because Santoro actually is going to be our grouping character. Now, he's the only character that I've come across that has an AoE suck-in ability. And what this ability is going to be doing, and this is from his ultimate, it basically will hurl a abyssal spear, and this abyssal spear will pull in enemies. So the way that this typically works is that I will cast EG's spotlight ability, which is its own radial circle, like position, and usually it's somewhere on the field. You can usually see it. It's always there. It's like a kind of like pinkish color, right? Now, with that, I always try to make sure that when I'm proccing Santoro's ability, it's somewhere near there, so it groups everything into that zone. And then from there, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be then nuking with Mew. Now, Mew is actually good. I actually just got her earlier this morning. I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't really too sure if I was gonna use her, but she actually is kind of nuts. So I really like this character a lot. But the thing about this is that this role can be swapped out with any character. So for example, the freebie character that they give you, Suki, that's actually who I was utilizing right before this, and it worked just fine. It just put everybody into one spot. Then you're inside of that spotlight, and you could just nuke everything. And even though these units, for example, like between Santaro and Mew are range, you can still get up close, right? So that you're able to deal all of that damage and get that buff. Now, the other thing is too, is that she has her own things within her kit that also helps her scale her damage. She's one of the higher attack damagers in the game, outside of, I think, like Inoki. But when you're looking at the value of that composition, it's just allowing me to be able to further stack that, right? It's just a kind of like nuke comp in a way. And it does require me to get the fight over with really quick. When we're in longer fights, we then have to now consider, HP, right? So this is the kind of the give and take based off of the composition you want to go for. If you're in a fight for too long, then you might run into an issue where you might need heals. Like your tank can only tank but for so long, right? And I think that that's a valuable thing to kind of consider. So if you realize that you're the kind of player that you're not really getting through fights that fast. I would even argue that you might, even myself, might have situations where I might have to alternate in a healer. I still would suggest having your healer built, or at least, thinking about doing so, right? Now, there are a couple of other ways for you to be able to passively heal. There is technically a tension card that's currently on the battle pass that will allow you to heal the character that follows up after the first initial character that procs your chain skill. But again, that's more so if you have the money to do that, right? So I'm not going to say that you have to, but that is an option for those that are looking to try to run more of these more nuke-esque comps, right? But all in all, you kind of get the general gist. I'm making sure that the comp works, and it just essentially is allowing me to kind of chain it properly, right? Now, I will dive a little bit deeper in future videos on some of these characters, because even like Santro, for example, he has this illusion gimmick, which is just really insane. But there's a whole bunch of other things. But we're really fixating on what these characters can do together, and not so much about just their individual prowess, right? Now, if we go back real quick, I want to touch on and now shift gears into the tension cards. The tension cards are another component to you being able to fully flesh out your team. And I think it's really important to understand what is required and what cards or types of cards you want to go for. Now, let's actually go back to the tension card screen, because I think we need to go over some basic stuff first so that you actually understand why you are allocating or even building tension cards a specific way in the first place. Now, I think the first thing that's worth mentioning is that every tension card minus the 0 tension cards have a condition. Now, what that means is that there needs to be something being fulfilled in order for that tension card to activate. Now, for some of these cards, it will be things like, for example, if we go to this one, all party members. So all party members just means if you have a team of 3, then you basically are going to have this card activate. Now, even within that, though, there can be another condition that will come into play where it's all party members, but then it also requires you to be in phase 1, which is your tension bar. Or it might still be all party members, but then like this one needs you to activate phase 2. So it still will be a condition of affecting your entire team, but it's going to require you to also be activating another thing. So these are the things that you have to consider when you're thinking about what tension cards you're going to be using. Because the other thing is too, is that a part of the conditions, and really outside of the conditions, these are also going to be abilities that will eat up your tension bar. Now, the other thing is too, is that you want to try to find a balance there, because ultimately you want to get to EX, right? EX is, especially in harder fights, going to be super lucrative because it's going to allow you to be able to do something really OP, or even activating your EX card. And if you have a whole bunch of cards that's eating up way too much tension, up until the point of you being able to build up your EX, you're just never going to activate your EX card, and it kind of ends up becoming a wasted card, right? So making sure that you read what the specific card requires. Like, for example, this one says, when a strategy skill hits, increase strategy skill damage multiplier. So a lot of people were misreading this, just thinking like, oh, well, hey, I could just do whatever. Well, no, if you have a character that's using their strategy skill and you are using their strategy skill a lot, then you're going to be proccing this quite a bit, right? And it says when the effect is active, it consumes 1.5 tension, which isn't terrible compared to like some other cards. But when you're hitting a lot, that can add up very, very fast. Because keep in mind, it's an action RPG, so that's all you're doing is hitting, right? So again, you have different abilities that proc off of different things. So like I said, with this one, it's basically a party member receives a recovery effect that recovers 2.9% of their own max HP every 3 seconds. But this requires you to hit phase EX, right? So it will proc then, but ultimately there's a uphill battle that you have to get to in order to even use it, right? Now, the other thing is too, is that you have some that are character conditions, right? So this is something that you have to also consider, is that there are going to be some cards that are unique to specific characters. So if you don't have the character, you can't utilize the ability. Like if we take, for example, if we look at a card that I currently have for EG, this card is actually, sorry, wrong one. It's this one. So take, for example, this card that I have for my EG. This is called Light Tempo. Let me actually move myself so you guys can see this. But it says when a primary attack hits, increases attack speed by 3.74% for 5 seconds. Now, the thing is that you have to be aware of the fact that it says if a target is granted attention, the effect will be replaced by hegemony. Now, the thing about this is that when you are looking at the first portion of this, when a primary attack hits, increases attack speed, you'll still be able to utilize that, right? Once you proc or activate phase 2. The other problem, though, is that you won't actually have this second portion of this skill activate. And that's because these are cards that are unique to a specific character, right? So the only character that has that attention ability is going to be EG. So if you don't have EG on the team, then you basically aren't getting this extra effect, right? So that's something that you have to also consider when you're deciding on what tension cards you want to use. And then the other thing is too, is what type of things are you needing to scale, right? What are you doing the most, or what is the bread and butter to that character? If it's something like ultimate skill damage, then you might want ultimate skill damage multiplier. If it's anything where they're maybe using their second ability, for example, or second primary, or secondary attack is what it's called, then you probably want to go for secondary attack damage multiplier. It really all depends on the character. And this is why I would say it's not really so much just, hey, use these tension cards and you're a god. It really depends on the composition that you're building. And so from there, you have to factor the phase condition, you have to factor in the party condition, and you also have to factor in the character condition if there is a character condition. And then, like I mentioned before, the main thing is really understanding how much tension that you're eating up, because based off of that will determine whether or not you're able to utilize your EX card. Keep in mind, EX cards are always going to proc during the EX phase. So yeah, these cards are not always active. And I think a lot of people thought that they were just cards that are just always active. No. They are cards that have some conditions, and some are much easier than others to get. Like, for example, you do have phase 0 cards. The phase 0 cards are actually going to basically just kind of be active, right? Now, there are a couple of different other effects that you have to consider as well. There might be some unique things to a specific character, and it might require those types of things as well for the effect target. But as far as the phase condition, that will definitely vary based off of each card that you're looking at, right? So even like this one's able to grant 1 self-limit points. And this is going to be something that I can utilize on a character like Mew, for example, right? But the thing is that you have to have the condition met for that character, which I do, right? So these are just like some of the things that you have to consider with tension card combos, as well as how you're building your composition. Now, again, when you look at the team comp that I have and how I decided to actually place my tension cards, we're going with the full party, right? Which is giving me that increased crit rate and defense point, because we want to be doing more damage, but we also want things like my tank to basically not die. When granted Unity, there will be basically a 2 times effectiveness, and Unity just requires when you are a 3-party or have 3 party members, it increases the member's defense points by 5%. If 1 party member is knocked out, this effect will be removed, right? So very simple. It automatically is going to operate or be active once phase 1 is in effect, and 10% crit rate and 10% more defense, plus the Unity buff, and then the 2 times effectiveness. That's kind of nice, right? So this is a really, really good card, and this is one of the free cards that you get in the very beginning, right? So then, of course, I'm using the Painful Swing. Painful Swing just makes it to where my ultimate skill damage multiplier is increased. It does consume 30 tension, but the thing is that this is at that point of hitting EX, so I feel like this card works really well, because the one thing that you're doing at that point, if you're in EX, is you're going to probably ult, and it will basically scale that, right? And then the next card here that we have is the Filthy Rich Guy. Filthy Rich Guy is going to be giving me some more crit rate, and this is basically going to also be an effect that's active during phase 2, and then we get that further increase of crit rate per noble obligation stack that we have. So that's basically what that's going to be giving. And then we have the Tearing Flash. The Tearing Flash is actually going to be something that is going to be for a character that primarily uses her secondary attack quite a bit, which is obviously Mew here. And then based off the stacks of Reconstruct, she can further increase the secondary damage multiplier for each of the stacks that she has. And so that's basically allowing her or enabling her to do more damage. And that's what we're essentially going for. And then for the very last one, I decided to just keep one of the ones that honestly they give you from the very beginning, because it's a revive card. I felt like this is a really nice card to have. Granted, it gives you the increased crit damage multiplier, but it also doesn't require you to have any phase. It can be at phase 0. And then basically when the operating character is knocked out, it will consume all your tension that you have and you revive them. And so this is something that I feel like is always a safe card to have, just because, again, if you're not running healers, there is a possibility that something could happen. You get overwhelmed and you might want that second chance so you can just finish off the fight. So this can technically get swapped out, but I will say that I always feel like having a little bit of a safe bet or kind of an ace up your sleeve is always something nice to have, right? So all in all and through, that's basically just like my tidbits and information I want to make sure I share with you guys as far as building your team comp and, of course, working in tension cards. If you guys have any specific questions, I think it would be important for you guys to either come through to the live streams when I'm streaming here on YouTube or on Twitch, twitch.tv/Zoxaskun, or come to the Discord. Because if you have any specific questions to your unique account, we can actually help you better that way. Again, with that, guys, that's going to be that for this one. Everyone, stay blessed, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.